What's up, everybody? I'm Jonathan the Baptist. Today, we're going to talk about why I don't like the Gospel Coalition. I'm specifically going to focus on the thing that made me be turned off by them, um, and not like all the other things that I've realized about them since. So, just like everybody else, I started, seeing the Gospel Coalition stuff on Facebook back in the day, back when I was still on the platform. I was like, oh, some of these articles can be helpful. Of course, I was pretty young still back then, but I was definitely young in politics, and I was getting into it. I was like, okay, yeah, let's see what they have to say here, and it was interesting. So this was somewhere between 2016 and 2020 is when I found the Gospel Coalition, started listening to or reading some of their articles, not all of them, but I read some of them more casually, and then 2020 came, and it was even more crazy than 2016 was. I, I I had noticed in like 2019 some articles that I was like, I don't know about this, and I was just like, what are they saying here? Um, and and so I started being a little more critical about uh, the Gospel Coalition, what they were reading, and the reason was because they seemed to demonize President Trump in a way that, in a way that they didn't do to Joe Biden. They tried to um, present themselves as like this middle ground, like let's fairly discuss both issues, but in the way that they described both candidates, it seemed like they hated Trump. But then they would like reluctantly talk about some of the bad things. Oh, well, Joe Biden's not a perfect candidate either. We understand why people don't like him, but it's like super obvious why everybody hates Trump. And I'm just like, what? Why? Like, and it's like article after article, some of which I feel like might have maybe even been taken off the website, but or at least off Facebook, and they they just kept bashing Trump, and believe me, I think Trump, just like every other politician, has a lot of reason, especially Trump, has a lot of things that we should be critical of, because he did and said a lot of dumb stuff, but it seemed in 2020 that it got, for Gospel Coalition specific, about voting, like as if they were trying to say it's okay to vote for a baby murderer. Like, I'm not saying that Joe Biden himself has murdered babies, but he is pro the murder of millions of babies, and the Gospel Coalition admits this in most of the articles that I read, and I realize that like they're like contracting writers to write these articles, so I don't know like who is actually part of TGC or just is a outside hired writer. I don't really know. I don't really keep up with all that jazz. But they are editing and presenting this as their article. So they have the rights to the article as the publisher. So I was just like, good grief! Like I got tired of constantly having Trump being bashed by the TGC, whereas Biden was reluctantly talked about some of his bad things, and we'll get into that, some of this specifically. But and then like right in 2021, one of the first things that Joe Biden does is, I don't remember if it's in his first day of office, because he signed like 8 or 9 executive orders day one, and I think it was one of those that undid what Trump did, which was to make sure taxpayers in America weren't paying for millions of abortions overseas. So Biden undid that. So now we are again paying for millions of overseas abortions. And I was just like, this is what you've reaped. Like, even if it wasn't day one, it was in the first few days of his administration. Well, the Gospel Coalition put out an article like right after, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure it was very shortly after, condemning Biden for doing that. And I'm like, guys, like, it's rich for you to spend all 2020 like talking about how it's okay for Christians to vote for this guy, but then you turn around and you condemn him for it. And I'm just like, maybe you should have spent time like, hey, we need to, as Christians, stand together and say, we need to not vote for this guy, because this guy he's going to make us pay for millions of abortions. So whether you like it or not, all of us as Americans are complicit in the murder of babies, because our tax dollars are going to overseas abortions, but also in America too. We pay for these programs in the government, and so we're complicit whether we want to be or not. And so so it's black and white. You either vote for the guy who's pro murdering millions of babies, or the guy who's not. Now, I'll say, in 2016, I wasn't sure about Trump. I had the same reservations that every other person did. Like, this guy's been a liberal forever. Yeah, he's saying things now, but politicians say all sorts of stuff. But I ended up, voting for Trump because I trusted what he said. In fact, I didn't. I was like, God, well, this is the only guy that's running that's pro-life, and that's, ultimately all I care about, because I can live in a socialist government, as a Christian, but as a pro-life, as a pro-lifer, like, I'm going to fight against that. I mean, I'll fight against socialism too, but I'll take socialism over abortion any day. And so I was like, well, God, I'm going to give it to you. If I'm going to vote for Trump, and I just hope that you'll use him to save babies. And guess what? He has. God used Trump to save babies. And by putting 3 judges in. But not even that, but we have a whole bunch of other pro-life judges that have been put in across the country. So, Supreme Court and other judges. So it's like the evaluation was good. It was good. I mean, he did other things that were great too, but now we look at Biden, and he's, first thing, he's making you pay for abortions again. And I'm just like, this was clear, TGC. This was clear. There's no wiggle room around it, and sometimes they'd admit that there were good articles that they posted, but I got tired of all the other ones that they were posting. So let's look at a few things that I've found, and we can talk about specifics. So here's one: why Christians should be single, or when Christians should be single issue voters. Sorry, part of that's cut off there. All right, so here this guy gives his single issue that determines his vote, and that is justice. But here's the problem. Justice has a lot of, and human dignity mean a lot of different things, opposing things in our political context. So on the one hand, you have the SJWs who are saying, oh, well, we need a socialistic government, and that's the only way we can have justice and human dignity, is if taxpayers are paying for all this extraordinary things, because that's what it really means to have justice and human dignity. It also means that, you have to accept the idea that cops are killing black people indiscriminately because of their race, which is ridiculous. You have to believe all these other, or they believe all these other things, Well, but on the other hand, there is actual, millions of abortions every year where they're murdering little babies. Um, and so, like, you're not specific enough. So, like, I think there's some good in this article, but they're kind of muddying the water by not narrowing it down enough. Um, and so this is what the Gospel Coalition started doing, is that they feigned uh, um, to be like a middle ground. Like, hey, we can agree with everybody. We think that what this says is semi right. Here's the middle ground in between. And I don't mind a middle ground per se, but they muddied the water and never really took a hard position on a lot of things. They did say, like, they would say, yeah, we're anti-abortion. I wish everybody would get rid of abortion. But then they would be like, oh, it's okay to vote for Joe Biden. It's okay for this. They would say we should have one single vote, but my single issue is justice. I'm not going to define what justice is, even though it basically entails all of government. Like, justice is everything that the government does. It's a justice system. That's the whole point of government, is to enact justice. So it's like, there's a lot of things in justice. That's not a single issue. That's a umbrella term for a wide variety of issues. So it's just like, come on. So then we have this. This is just an article about 7 articles that he came across, and the one that stood out to me is this. So this is not a TGC article. This is one that they are promoting, or at least this guy is. I don't know who that is. This was, oh, by the way, the last one, that's in February 1st of 2016, and you can already kind of see some muddying waters. But this one's February of 2020, so a month, or several months before the election, which is really when I started noticing stuff. So this one is like, understanding why religious conservatives would vote for Trump. So he talks about these two polarizing sides, but never Trump and always Trump. But there's a third category, the reluctant Trump voter. But the voters in this category don't get a fair hearing they deserve, since they defy the simple binary portrayal of religious conservatives. So interesting that the never Trumpers apparently aren't the ones that are excluding. It's just the religious conservatives. Maybe I'm reading this wrong, but I don't know. Anyways, I'm like, reluctant Trump voters, that's all of TGC. I was a reluctant Trump voter the first time. It wasn't until I saw all the good things that he did, because politicians lie all the time. And Trump is a liar. He says all sorts of dumb stuff, and he lies about things all the time. I knew that. So I didn't trust him because he was a liberal. Before he decided to run as a Republican. So I was like, I don't know how to trust, if I can trust this guy. I don't know if this guy is really pro-life, but I realized this is the only one that's claiming to be pro-life. So, that it's the only shot we've got, is how I, weighed that. And so, I was reluctant Trump, but after 4 years of seeing all the good things he did, like starting to build the wall, like he brought an amazing economy. He got rid of a lot of payment for overseas abortions. He put a lot of pro-life judges. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem for Israel, something that people had been promising presidents have been promising for decades. Nobody did. He did all these things. It's almost like he did what he promised. I'm not saying he did everything, and he did do things I don't really care for, but there's a lot of good things that he did. And so I went from a reluctant Trumper to not an always Trumper. I'm not an always Trumper. I mean, Trump could do or say things, potentially, that in the next year that would say, if he runs again in 2024, I might not vote for him. Or maybe there's a better candidate. I don't know. We'll see. I moved from this middle ground to further over to the right. And I'm just like, but this reluctant Trump voter, that's all TGC is. So if they're either reluctantly voting for Trump, they don't vote at all, or they're voting Democrat. They're not. There's like TGC guys are not voting for Trump proudly. They very much are against that. I think they're more reluctantly. Joe Biden might be more where some of them are. Reluctant Joe Biden, reluctant Trump are in the middle. They don't vote. And two of those I don't mind. Reluctantly Trump, or I don't hate you for not voting. I have a lot of friends who did not vote. And I'm like, hey, I respect it. I disagree with you, but I respect it. But voting for somebody that's going to kill millions of babies, like, I don't have much respect for that. I can see that some people could get there logically and not, break their own conscience. But I think that it's, I don't think it's worthwhile. So here they're including an article, that they're recommending an article, really, that it's just that they're not really getting at the heart of some of the issues. And like by itself, that's not necessarily bad, it's a bunch of other stuff in here, and not everything TGC does is bad. Don't get me wrong. They have some good articles, because some of the people who write and get published there are good. So here's another one: elegant simplicity of the pro-life. So this is going to get to what I was talking about earlier. So October 13th, 2020. So this is a month before the election. He's talking about how simple the pro-life issue is. But we're going to come down here. So he kind of goes back and forth talking about why it's understandable that people might vote for one or the other. And then he gets to this paragraph. Many white evangelicals in 2020 might appreciate a realistic alternative to the boorishness and the chaos of the Trump presidency. I'm just like, what? Joe Biden, he may not be the most articulate person, and he may get run over by the leftist party, and he may have us paying for millions of dead children, but he's not. But he is. I can understand why people might appreciate him as a realistic alternative to the boorishness and the chaos of the Trump presidency. Like, come on, guys. Like, in the end, he's like, he's basically saying you can vote. It's understandable why people vote for either, and undoubtedly most people might vote for Trump. But it's like, come on, man. Like, this is what I'm talking about. This is how they. TGC over and over again in 2020 portrayed the issue. If they had said, we're not going to tell you how to vote, here's why we think it's okay to vote for either, I'd have been fine. But they always demonized Trump, and they always were like making excuses for Biden. And I'm just like, guys, if you like Biden, just admit it. So he references or links this article here. Christian Witness demands that we defend truth and reject Donald Trump. Now, I haven't read this article. I don't have time for that. This isn't TGC, so I don't want to spend a ton of time on here, but I appreciate that these guys are sticking to their guns. I might disagree with them. Maybe they're going to vote for Joe Biden. I don't know. Maybe they are going to not vote at all. It doesn't matter. But they're not lukewarm. What does Jesus say? Like, don't be a fence sitter. Don't be lukewarm. Be hot or cold, lest I spit you out of my mouth. Like, I don't want these guys to be lukewarm. I don't care if you aren't or trying not to like tell me how to vote. I'm fine with that. But I would rather you just come out and say, we don't like Trump. This is why we at the Gospel Coalition would not vote for Trump, rather than make these passive aggressive attacks on him. Like, where was it? Rather than making these passive aggressive attacks on one but not the other. And then you just kind of like um, make light of it. Like, we don't see like these kinds of words, boorishness and chaos, applied to Joe Biden. He may not be articulate, but namely because he's like got dementia and he can't barely think. Um, he may well get run over by the extreme left, which is what happened. But he's a tempting choice after 4 years of Trump. No, he isn't. No, he isn't. and yet, Biden's increasingly hardline pro-abortion views. Right. He is a deeply problematic alternative. He's not an alternative at all. He's a terrible choice. It's like, so this is why I don't like the Gospel Coalition. Like, be hot, be cold, lest I spit you out of my mouth. I don't mind you trying to be neutral, although nobody's neutral in this economy. Everybody's either on one side or the other. But I don't mind you trying to present this as in fairness. Like, I'm not an extreme Trump voter. I don't like everything the man does or says. But there are some things that outweigh other things, namely abortion, that outweighs pretty much everything else in this world, as far as politics are concerned right now. I mean, maybe another issue comes up and I'm like, oh, well, it's having millions of people die here immediately, or the potential of millions of it unborn, and that, I don't know. It's hard for me to bring up hypothetical because I don't know what it's going to be like. I can't think of something right off the top of my head that would make me vote for somebody that's pro-choice. But I suppose it's hypothetically possible. But so I don't mind you like trying to be neutral or trying to be fair to both sides. That's fine. And sometimes I feel like some of the authors have been fair. And I don't mind you telling me your opinion. Like, tell me what you think. Like, this is what, like the first guy, he's like, this is what I use. I don't think that's helpful for anybody because you're not narrowing it down, but I appreciate that more than the last guy, because at least he's narrowing it down, to like, this is what it is for me. I'm not very clear or well thought out about this, but this is where I've landed. I appreciate that more, but I still feel like the Gospel Coalition really just muddies the water, and that's not helpful for anybody. Especially nowadays, I see a lot of articles that they come out with, and I'm just like, this isn't helpful at all. Like, you're just muddying the water. Like, you're trying to make it almost seem okay to do these things. And like, there's a bunch of articles that I read from them to research this discussion or this video where they talked about they encourage like maybe not voting is an issue, is the way to go, and or voting third party. Like, I'm all for that. Like, I'm I started off more libertarian and then moved to the Republican Party. I haven't voted for Republican every time that I was able to, because some of the Republicans did not earn my vote. I'm looking at you, Romney. But I've never voted Democrat. And I don't think, with the party as it stands today being pro-choice, like radically pro-choice, it's never going to happen under this banner. If your banner is, we're going to sacrifice millions of kids to Molech, I'm not voting for you. I'm going to vote for the guy who says a lot of mean stuff on Twitter and does a lot of dumb stuff, but generally it does good for the people. So I'm tired of the Gospel Coalition. I watched A.D. Robles' Rise and Fall of the Gospel Coalition. Where's the next thing, man? What is it? You done part 1 and 2, maybe 3? Where's the next one? Like, let's keep it rolling. I'm looking forward to that. Like, I think that they spent a lot of their time trying to pretend to be neutral. A lot of their new videos about like a neutral conversation are just bad. AD does like some good jobs with that. I think Conversations That Matter podcast has done a video about like the 7 worst TGC articles. That was an interesting video. But for me, like, I just got tired of these articles that muddied the waters. They didn't really help anybody. Not to say that there aren't good articles on the website, but I don't want to. I just got tired of reading article after article after article that was just like, we're going to muddy the waters so that everybody can, enjoy our stuff. Like, be hot, be cold, and let's be done with it. It's okay to have a bias and to admit your bias, and still, try to be fair to your opponent in the argument. Like, I'm trying to be fair to TGC. Like, they're not all bad. They just have done a lot of bad articles. And it's okay. Like, if you don't like Trump, that's fine. If you have religious reasons or logical reasons that you can't personally vote for Trump, that's fine. We're all Christians here. We're not all Christians, but I'm a Christian. I can welcome you as a brother even if you don't vote for Trump. Like, I'm gonna have a hard time voting if you're voting for Joe Biden, but I'll at least respect the fact that you are trying to live a moral life. And I'm gonna say, like, certain reasons are gonna disqualify you from being a Christian if you're voting for Joe Biden. Namely, like, if you're actually pro-choice, I'm like, you're not really Christian then, are you? Like, or at least you're not, like, maybe you're a young Christian, or maybe you've not been reading the Bible. You don't believe the Bible, which means you might not be a Christian. So there are things there are reasons that people vote for Joe Biden that would cause me to be concerned about your faith, whether you're actually a believer, and there are reasons that wouldn't cause me to do that, and I might talk about that in another video. But so I don't like it when people on my side are like, well, everybody who votes for Joe Biden is not a Christian, or everybody who, I haven't heard it, but apparently there are people who say, like, if you don't vote for Trump, you're not a Christian. Like, I haven't heard anybody say that, but maybe there are people out there who say that, but we can be Christians and disagree about things other than the gospel, and the things around the gospel. Even politics, like, we can disagree. Like, is Trump good? Is the Republican Party bad? Should we vote Democrat? I'm fine with disagreeing. I know Christians who voted for Joe Biden. I do have questions about their faith and some of them, but it's not helpful to anybody to muddy the waters. And all I want is clarity. Like, some of the articles TGC did, they were good, they were clarifying. I disagree with them, but they were well written. There are others that just muddy the water, and in 2020, that's what I felt like all their articles were doing, at least all the ones that I saw. And so, I'm not on Facebook anymore, so I don't see the Gospel Coalition articles show up. So, which, makes my life, easier. But, so in conclusion, I guess, in this rambling thing, I don't hate the TGC, or at least I don't hate all the authors. I don't know any of them by name, but there are some good arguments made in some of the articles, but there are some unhelpful arguments made in the articles that make it seem as if they are just trying to cloud the water to make it more excusable to do things that they know that most people believe is wrong. Um, and so that is what drove me away from the Gospel Coalition. So I got tired of the muddy water. I got tired of the lukewarm articles, and I wanted more hot and cold. I wanted something that I didn't have to spit out of my mouth. And honestly, 2 years later, they're still doing articles that are in the same vein. So maybe they're not specifically focused on Trump, but I don't know. Election's coming up soon, so we'll see what they start doing. In a year or two. But they have other articles that are just awful. And they're doing this on other issues as well. So it's not just the election. That's just the one I'm focusing on because that's where I started to notice it. This is other topics that they do the exact same thing, where they muddy the water to try to make it okay to disagree. But then the election is what I'm focused in this video on, because that's the one that I noticed at first. So video is really long. I hope that I explained that well. Sorry for the rambling. If you're from TGC, I don't hate you. If you're Christian, I think we're brothers and sisters. We'll see each other in heaven. I feel like some of the articles that y'all put out are not helpful, and I'd rather you just pick a side and defend it. Pick a side, defend it, and let's go from there. So let me know what you think. Do you like TGC? Some of my close friends love TGC. Let me know. If you're new here, go ahead and subscribe. I'm talking about anything and everything, Christian, politics, whatever. I enjoy doing it. So catch you next time. Peace.